Imagine a world where the very words you need to express dissent have been systematically erased from the dictionary.
Oh, that is absolutely terrifying.
Right. A world where, like, a momentary facial twitch can mean a death sentence, and where the most terrifying weapon isn't a bomb, but a cage of starving rats, tailored specifically to your deepest phobia.
Yeah, it's just the stuff of nightmares, honestly.
Totally. I mean, the terrifying truth about George Orwell's 1984 isn't that it's just a work of fiction. It's that it was written as a manual, a warning, like a blueprint of our darkest societal impulses.
Couldn't agree more.
Welcome to a very special, custom-tailored deep dive, crafted specifically for you, the AudioSutra listener. Today, we are taking you deep into the architecture of totalitarianism. We're stepping into the chilling, suffocating, and unforgettable world of George Orwell's masterpiece, 1984.
And we are doing this by, synthesizing the original text of the novel, plus Orwell's own fascinating appendix on Newspeak, and some really vital biographical records of the man himself.
Yeah, we are looking at the ultimate audio companion piece here.
Exactly. The goal isn't just to, walk you through a plot you might vaguely remember from a high school syllabus. We want to dissect the psychological terror, pull apart the philosophical traps, and examine the enduring warnings locked inside this book.
Okay, let's unpack this. We enter the world through our protagonist, Winston Smith. But Orwell makes a very specific, deliberate choice with Winston right out of the gate.
Right. He isn't some charismatic action hero at all.
No, not even close. He is 39 years old, frail, and suffering from a varicose ulcer above his right ankle that constantly itches. He lives in a dreary, rotting city that, constantly smells of boiled cabbage and old rag mats.
Ugh, you can almost smell it.
Yeah, it's visceral.
Yeah.
This is London, but it's the chief city of Airstrip 1. Which is merely the third most populous province of the massive globe-spanning superstate called Oceania.
And Orwell is telling us from page 1 that totalitarianism doesn't breed heroes. I mean, it breeds decay.
Exactly. Winston's physical state mirrors the physical state of truth in Oceania. But to understand how a world this grim, this utterly devoid of color springs into existence, we have to look at the architect himself.
We really do. We need to look at Arthur Blair, which is, of course, George Orwell's given name.
Right.
He was born in British India in 1903, and his father worked in the opium department of the civil service, which is already a stark introduction to the machinery of empire.
Oh, for sure. That's heavy.
Yeah. Orwell attended the prestigious Eton College, but his family couldn't afford a university education. So in 1922, he took a path that would permanently shape his understanding of power. He joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma.
Wow. So think about what it means to be an imperial police officer. You are literally the enforcer of an occupying force.
Exactly. You stand over a subjugated populace. And Orwell came to absolutely loathe imperialism because he saw the oppressive surveillance firsthand. He saw the casual brutality and the bureaucratic indifference required to keep a population pinned down.
It's like he realized that the oppressor is just as trapped by the system as the oppressed.
That's exactly it. So he resigned in 1927 and decided to become a writer, hoping to expose the truths he had seen.
But, the transition to writing wasn't some romantic Parisian dream. He moves to Paris hoping to freelance, and instead he finds himself literally scrubbing dishes in a fashionable hotel just to keep from starving.
Yeah, it was rough.
He ends up ill, penniless, and eventually moves back to England to live among tramps, like the absolute poorest, most forgotten people in society. He wrote about this in Down and Out in Paris and London.
Right. He wasn't just observing poverty. He was marinating in the crushing, grinding reality of it.
Yeah, he wanted to understand what destitution does to the human spirit. And I have to imagine when you strip away all societal safety nets, you see how easily human beings can be reduced to mere survival instincts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see the foundational blocks of Oceania being laid right there. Burma taught him the mechanics of authoritarian control and surveillance.
And then Paris and London taught him how poverty strips away human dignity, right?
Precisely. Making people compliant because they are just too exhausted to fight back. But the absolute crucible for Orwell's political ideology was the Spanish Civil War. That's what gave Oceania its specific flavor of ideological terror.
Oh, definitely. So in 1936, he went to Spain to fight against the fascists. He fought for the Republican side.
And initially in Barcelona, he experienced this profound, almost utopian, egalitarian spirit. I mean, people were treating each other as absolute equals. He wrote really movingly about this in Homage to Catalonia.
But then the revolution turned inward and began to eat itself. because the egalitarian movement got hijacked by Stalinist forces, right?
Yes, exactly. Orwell and his wife, Eileen, narrowly escaped communist purges in Barcelona in 1937. He watched his own supposed allies turn against the genuine revolutionaries.
That is wild. He saw people he fought alongside being smeared as traitors, arrested and executed by the very people claiming to fight for liberation.
It's terrifying. That has to create a profound ideological whiplash. You go to war for freedom, and you watch the architects of that freedom build a new cage.
And then compound that trauma with his experience a few years later. During World War II, he's working at the BBC Eastern Service, writing broadcasts to India to stimulate interest in the war effort.
Yeah, he knew he was manufacturing propaganda.
Exactly. He described feeling like an orange that's been trodden on by a very dirty boot.
That is just the perfect storm of disillusionment. He had seen the brutality of the right through imperialism and fascism, and he had seen the treacherous, paranoid totalitarianism of the left through Stalinism.
Right, so he saw how bureaucracies use language to mask horror.
Exactly. All of these elements, surveillance, poverty, political betrayal, and mass propaganda, they all fused together in the crucible of his mind. And he was writing 1984 while battling severe tuberculosis and grieving the sudden death of his wife in 1945.
Oceania is literally the amalgamation of Orwell's deepest, most hard-won fears. And you see those fears architecturally manifested in the four massive pyramidal ministries that dominate the rotting skyline of London.
Oh, the ministries. They're terrifying.
The party has structured society around these four pillars, and their names are a masterclass in psychological abuse.
We really are.
You have the Ministry of Truth, which deals entirely in lies, propaganda, and rewriting history. The Ministry of Peace is solely concerned with waging perpetual, unwinnable war.
And then the Ministry of Love.
Right. The Ministry of Love is a windowless fortress surrounded by barbed wire where dissidents are tortured. And finally, the Ministry of Plenty enforces artificial scarcity and starvation.
It's just so blatant.
I want to linger on this because it's not just ironic. Why name the torture building the Ministry of Love? It's not a joke. It feels like a deliberate attempt to break the citizens' mind, forcing them to swallow an impossible contradiction just to prove the party's dominance over reality itself.
It is the ultimate flex of authoritarian power. The party's three core slogans operate on the exact same principle.
Oh, you mean war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
Exactly. They are paradoxes. The goal isn't to trick the citizen into believing a lie. The goal is to force the citizen to actively participate in the destruction of their own logic.
Wow, yeah.
When you are forced to publicly agree that a torture center is the Ministry of Love, you are surrendering your cognitive sovereignty. You are saying, I do not trust my own senses or my own vocabulary. I only trust the party.
It is an act of psychological submission repeated 100 times a day. But psychological submission to impossible concepts isn't enough on its own. The party can't just rely on grand architecture and slogans.
No, they need a mechanism that penetrates the most intimate spaces of daily life. And that brings us to the telescreen.
Right. Winston has this oblong metal plaque in his apartment, like a dulled mirror. It constantly broadcasts statistics about pig iron production and military victories.
But the terrifying feature is that it receives as well as transmits.
Right. Exactly. Any sound above a very low whisper, any movement within its field of vision is picked up by the thought police.
To understand the chilling brilliance of the telescreen, we really have to talk about the panopticon. It's an architectural concept designed by the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, imagine a circular prison with a watchtower in the center. The guards in the tower can see into every cell, but the prisoners cannot see into the tower.
Because they don't know when they're being watched.
Right. Because a prisoner never knows exactly when they are being watched. They have to assume they are being watched all the time. They begin to police their own behavior.
Oh, that is the genius of Oceania's telescreens. The thought police couldn't possibly monitor millions of citizens simultaneously. The logistics are just impossible.
But they don't need to. The terror is rooted in the uncertainty. You live from a habit that becomes an unconscious instinct, assuming every sound is overheard and every twitch is scrutinized.
You literally become your own jailer. You police your own involuntary reflexes. The party even has a word for it, face crime.
Face crime. Yeah, it's wild.
A nervous tadic, an unconscious look of anxiety while listening to a victory bulletin can give you away and result in your execution, which makes Winston's actions in the opening chapter so incredibly tense.
Oh, absolutely. He finds a tiny blind spot in his apartment, a shallow alcove where the telescreen can hear him, but can't see him.
Right, and he takes out a beautiful, thick, blank book with smooth, creamy paper that he bought in a junk shop. He uses an archaic pen with a real nib, and he begins to write in a diary.
Which is huge.
He writes the date, April 4th, 1984. Though he realizes he isn't even totally sure what year it is because the calendar has been manipulated. And then, almost in a trance, he writes down with Big Brother over and over again. He commits thought crime.
The physical act of putting ink to paper is the decisive point of no return. In Oceania, nothing is technically illegal because there are no written laws.
Right, the system operates purely on the whims of power.
Exactly. But Winston knows that writing in a diary is a definitive act of rebellion. The essential crime that contains all other crimes in this society is thought crime.
And the punishment isn't a fine or even just death, it's vaporization. The thought police don't just kill you, they remove your name from the registers.
Every record of everything you've ever done is wiped out. Your existence is scrubbed from history. You become an unperson. You never existed.
And to avoid that fate, citizens can't just be quietly obedient. They have to violently, actively perform their loyalty. If the panopticon controls behavior through passive fear, the 2 minutes hate controls behavior through active, weaponized emotion.
Yeah, the 2 minutes hate is brutal.
Winston is at work in the records department, and everyone gathers in front of a giant telescreen. Suddenly, a hideous grinding noise starts, like a monstrous machine running without oil. And the face of Emmanuel Goldstein flashes on the screen.
Goldstein being the primal traitor.
Yeah, exactly. The man who supposedly betrayed the party and now leads a vast, shadowy underground army called the Brotherhood.
The scene Orwell paints of the hate is a profound psychological study in mass hysteria. Goldstein is on the screen, delivering an exaggerated attack on the party, demanding freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and peace.
But marching endlessly behind his face are columns of enemy soldiers.
Right. And within 30 seconds, the crowd in the room is in an absolute frenzy. People are leaping up and down, shouting at the top of their lungs to drown out Goldstein's voice.
A little sandy-haired woman is squeaking with fear. The dark-haired girl from the fiction department, whom Winston actively hates and fears, actually picks up a heavy dictionary and hurls it at the screen.
Eventually, the frenzy morphs into a rhythmic, hypnotic, subhuman chanting of BB in praise of Big Brother.
What's so disturbing is Winston's internal reaction. He finds himself shouting with them, kicking his chair. He literally cannot stop himself from participating in the collective rage.
It's infectious.
But he observes something vital. This hatred is completely fluid. Sometimes his rage is directed at Goldstein, but sometimes, in the span of a millisecond, his hatred pivots entirely, and he directs it at Big Brother, the party, and the thought police.
And then, a split second later, he switches his hatred to the dark-haired girl in front of him.
Yes, he has these vivid, violently graphic hallucinations about hurting her, and he realizes it stems from sheer sexual frustration. He hates her because she is young and desirable and totally inaccessible because of the party's rules.
Which brings up a great question. Why does the party enforce this kind of puritanical sexual repression?
Is it just moralism?
Yeah, is it?
No, it has absolutely nothing to do with morality. It is entirely about energy conservation and redirection. The party's psychological genius is that they recognize human emotion like love, lust, familial loyalty, anger as raw, potent energy.
So they don't try to abolish it. Right, they bottle it up and weaponize it. The sexual frustration of the citizens is deliberately engineered. If you have a healthy sexual relationship or a deep bond with a child or a partner, you are emotionally fulfilled.
And if you are happy and fulfilled in your private life, you are far less likely to be whipped into a frenzy over abstract political goals.
Exactly. The party suppresses the libido, suppresses the family bond, and takes all that pent-up neurotic energy and redirects it outward into political hysteria and leader worship. The 2 minutes hate is a release valve.
It's an act of self-hypnosis where the individual consciousness is happily drowned in shared frenzy. But psychological manipulation and emotional release valves aren't enough to secure permanent dominance.
No, they're really not.
For the party to maintain absolute control, they can't just dictate how you feel today. They have to dictate what you remember about yesterday. They have to control the objective facts of reality.
And that is exactly what Winston is paid to do. He works in the records department of the Ministry of Truth. His entire job is to systematically alter historical records.
The mechanics of his job are endlessly fascinating and terrifying. Winston sits in his cubicle and receives small cylindrical tubes via a pneumatic system.
These tubes contain instructions to rectify old issues of the times.
Right. So if Big Brother gave a speech last month predicting a military offensive in North Africa, but the actual offensive happened in South India, Winston pulls the old newspaper, rewrites the speech to make Big Brother's prediction match current reality, and then submits the new version.
It's seamless. If the Ministry of Plenty promised that the chocolate ration wouldn't be reduced and then they cut it in half, Winston alters the original promise into a warning that a reduction might be necessary.
And what happens to the original true document? It gets shoved into a memory hole, which is a slit in the wall that leads to a massive incinerator in the basement.
The entire history of Oceania is essentially a palimpsest.
A palimpsest being an ancient manuscript where the original writing has been scraped off so the parchment can be written on again.
Exactly. But in Oceania, history is scraped clean and reinscribed exactly as often as necessary to ensure the party is always right. And Winston has a chilling realization while doing this.
He realizes he isn't even committing forgery, because the original numbers he's altering were complete fantasy, too. He's just substituting one piece of nonsense for another piece of nonsense.
The most striking example of this total manipulation of truth is the creation of Comrade Ogilvy. Winston is tasked with rewriting an old speech where Big Brother praised an inter-party member named Comrade Withers.
The problem is, Withers has recently fallen out of favor and been vaporized. He is an unperson. He cannot exist in the historical record.
So how does Winston fix the speech? He doesn't just delete the mention of Withers. He invents an entirely new human being to take his place.
He literally fabricates a dead war hero out of thin air. He creates Comrade Ogilvy, a man who supposedly refused all toys as a child except a drum and a submachine gun.
Who designed a deadly hand grenade at 19, right?
Yeah, and who died heroically in battle at 23, sinking with his helicopter into the sea while clutching secret dispatches. Winston dictates this utter fiction into his speak-right machine, submits it, and within hours, Comrade Ogilvy exists in the past just as authentically as Julius Caesar or Charlemagne.
It's wild. As Winston notes, it is a curious concept that you can create dead men, but not living ones.
It perfectly illustrates the fragility of recorded truth. If all records tell the same tale, then the lie passes into history and becomes truth.
But the Ministry of Truth isn't content with just altering physical documents. They are digging deeper. They are altering the very tools human beings use to formulate thought.
Right, we see this through Winston's interaction in the canteen with a colleague named Syme. Syme is a philologist.
For those unfamiliar, philology is the study of language, how words develop, and historical linguistics.
Exactly. Syme is an expert working on the 11th edition of the Newspeak Dictionary. He's a tiny, dark-haired man with an almost mystical, pedantic passion for his work. And his work is the systematic destruction of the English language.
What's fascinating here is how Syme gleefully describes his job. He tells Winston that it's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. The whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of human thought.
Wait, how does he explain the logic behind that?
Well, Syme explains it like this. If you have the word good, what is the justification for a word like bad? Ungood does the job perfectly. It's the exact opposite, with no nuance.
Right, that makes sense in a twisted way.
And if you want something stronger than good, you don't need words like excellent or splendid. Those words carry emotional weight in historical context. You just say plus good or double plus good.
So the vocabulary gets smaller every single year. Okay, let's unpack this. How does lacking a specific word prevent someone from having a thought?
It's a great question.
There is a concept in linguistics called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or linguistic determinism. It suggests that the structure of a language shapes or limits the ways in which a speaker forms conceptions of the world.
Yes, exactly.
So if I don't have the word for freedom, do I stop feeling the desire to be free? Or do I just lose the ability to conceptualize that desire, to debate it, to organize a protest around it?
Exactly the latter. The party's goal is to make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express a dissenting concept.
Wow.
If you want to rebel, you can't articulate what you are rebelling against. You might feel a vague, formless dissatisfaction, but you can't intellectually process it.
It's like trying to paint a masterpiece, but the government has confiscated every pigment except gray. You might have the vision of a vibrant sunrise in your mind, but you physically lack the tools to manifest it on the canvas.
That's a really good analogy.
So what does this all mean for society? If you eliminate verbs and adjectives, if you strip away all nuance, don't you also eliminate the capacity for complex problem solving? Like, how does a society advance or innovate if the citizens literally cannot formulate a complex thought?
The terrifying answer is that Oceania doesn't want to advance. Progress is dangerous. Oceania wants to freeze history entirely.
Freeze history. That's a chilling thought.
Syme points out that by the year 2050, no one will be alive who could even understand the conversation he and Winston are currently having. The literature of the past, like Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, will be translated into newspeak and changed into something entirely contradictory to what they originally meant.
So there's no way to even access the old ideas.
Right. Syme says it plainly. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. And the ultimate psychological tool required to maintain this state of unconsciousness is a concept the novel calls doublethink.
Doublethink. It is the engine that runs this entire society. Winston practices it, Syme practices it, the inner party relies on it. The text defines it as the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accept both of them.
It is the power to know and not to know, to use logic against logic.
It is the ultimate form of reality control. Doublethink allows a person to tell deliberate lies while genuinely believing in them, to forget any fact that has become inconvenient, and then when it becomes necessary again, to draw it back from oblivion for exactly as long as it is needed.
And here is the truly dizzying part. Even to understand and use the word doublethink involves the use of doublethink.
Yeah, I want to make sure we really grasp this because it's not just hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is knowing the truth but pretending otherwise. Doublethink is genuinely rewriting your own brain in real time.
It really is.
It's the psychological mechanism that allows the party to constantly change alliances in their endless war. One day, Oceania is at war with Eurasia and allied with Eastasia. The next day, the enemy changes.
And through doublethink, the population doesn't just pretend the enemy has always been Eastasia. They genuinely rewire their memories so that they believe it has always been Eastasia.
They believe the lie, they forget the truth, and then they forget that they forgot.
It is a perfect, inescapable, self-sustaining psychological loop. If you control the language through newspeak, and you control memory through doublethink, and you control history through the Ministry of Truth, you've successfully frozen time.
The party has achieved immortality. And amidst this frozen, decaying history, amidst this linguistic prison, Winston is absolutely desperate. He is looking for any crack in the monolith.
He seeks hope in the darkest corners of London.
Exactly. And he looks first to the proles, the proletarians. They make up 85% of Oceania's population. They live in absolute squalor, but the party mostly ignores them.
The text says they are left to themselves, like cattle turned loose upon the plains of Argentina.
The thought police rarely interfere with them. They work heavy labor, they breed, they drink cheap beer, and they obsess over the lottery, which Winston knows is mostly rigged with fictional winners anyway.
Winston writes in his diary, "If there is hope, it lies in the proles." He believes that only there, in those teeming, unsupervised masses, could enough physical force ever be generated to destroy the party.
But he immediately runs into a paradox, right?
Yeah. He notes, until they become conscious, they will never rebel, and until after they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious. He is looking for historical awareness.
So he goes to a pub in the Prole district, trying to find someone old enough to remember life before the revolution, hoping to find proof that life used to be better. He buys a beer for an old man and begs him to tell him about the past.
And it is one of the most frustrating conversations in literature.
It really is. Winston is asking these grand, sweeping sociological questions about capitalist oppression and freedom, and the old man can only remember microscopic, completely useless personal details.
He remembers the beer used to taste better, and he remembers wearing top hats. He completely misses the broader historical context.
Winston realizes the old man's memory is just a rubbish heap of disconnected details. The past is effectively dead because the few survivors lack the intellectual perspective to compare one age to another.
But Winston's dangerous foray into the Prole district isn't entirely fruitless. He wanders back to the same antique junk shop where he bought his diary.
Oh, Mr. Charrington's shop.
Right. The owner, Mr. Charrington, is a mild old man with a velvet jacket who seems like a relic of a gentler time. He shows Winston a piece of soft, rainwatery glass with a beautiful, delicate piece of coral embedded inside. It's a paperweight.
Winston buys it immediately, not because it has any practical use, but specifically because it belongs to an age quite different from the present.
Why do you think this physical object is so vital to Winston?
Because in a world where every document is a palimpsest, where reality exists only in the mind of the party, a useless, beautiful antique is tangible proof of an objective reality. It is a physical anchor to a time before Big Brother.
That's beautifully said.
Charrington also takes Winston upstairs to a dusty room that lacks a telescreen. He teaches Winston the first few lines of an old nursery rhyme. Oranges and lemons say the bells of St. Clement's. It's another fragile thread connecting Winston to a forgotten past.
But the illusion of safety is shattered the moment Winston leaves the shop. His blood turns to ice because he sees the dark-haired girl from the fiction department, the one he hallucinated about murdering during the 2 minutes 8 walking down the street.
Oh man, the panic he must have felt.
She is in her blue party overalls. She is clearly following him. Winston is instantly convinced she is an amateur spy or a direct agent of the thought police.
He contemplates smashing her skull in with the paperweight right there in the alley. He goes home fully expecting the thought police to break down his door that night to torture and vaporize him.
The paranoia is absolute. But 4 days later, the narrative shifts on its axis. Winston is walking down a corridor at work, and the dark-haired girl is walking toward him. Her arm is in a sling.
As they pass each other, she stumbles and falls. Winston, acting on a basic, suppressed human reflex of empathy, stops to help her up.
And as he does, she subtly flips a small, folded piece of paper into his hand.
He goes back to his cubicle, his heart hammering. He is terrified it's a summons to kill himself or a threat from the Brotherhood. But when he finally unfolds it, under the cover of a stack of papers, it reads, "I love you."
It is a seismic shock to his entire reality. That tiny piece of paper reignites his desire to stay alive.
They manage, through incredibly tense and risky maneuvers in crowded cafeterias, to arrange a clandestine meeting. They take separate trains out of the city, walking into a sunlit clearing in the woods, far from the telescreens and hidden microphones.
Winston recognizes the landscape from his dreams. He calls it the Golden Country. And here we finally get to know Julia. She's 27, bold, athletic, and completely different from the orthodox zealot Winston imagined.
When they are finally alone in the woods, Julia pulls a small slab of chocolate from her pocket. And it's not the dull, brown, crumbly, synthetic party stuff. It's real, dark, shiny chocolate she procured on the black market.
The smell alone unlocks a powerful, repressed childhood memory for Winston. Then she rips off her scarlet sash, the emblem of the Junior Anti-Sex League, and aggressively flings it away.
The physical act of removing the sash is profoundly symbolic. Winston looks at her and realizes that their connection isn't just a romance. Orwell writes, "Their embrace had been a battle, the climax of victory. It was a blow struck against the party."
It was a political act. By reclaiming their bodies and their desires from the state, they are committing treason.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Their motivations for this treason are completely different. Winston is a philosophical rebel. He thinks in grand historical terms.
Right. He is consumed by the mechanics of the party.
He literally tells Julia, "We are the dead." He views their rebellion as a fatalistic march toward an inevitable execution. But Julia is entirely different. She is a practical survivor.
She has grown up under the party and knows nothing else. She isn't interested in the next generation or grand historical truths. She is interested in her own life, her own pleasures, her own survival.
Exactly. She hates the party simply because it restricts her personal desires, but she has absolutely no interest in party doctrine.
When Winston starts trying to explain the philosophical horrors of newspeak or the mechanics of doublethink, she literally falls asleep. Winston calls her a rebel from the waist downwards, and she thinks that is a brilliant compliment.
But let me push back on this, or rather, let's analyze this difference. The party seeks to destroy all private loyalties. They turn children into spies. We see that with Winston's neighbor, Parsons.
Yeah.
His kids wear spies' uniforms, they beg to go see Eurasian prisoners hanged, and eventually the little daughter turns her own father over to the thought police for sleep-talking. The party wants to eradicate the private, emotional world.
They absolutely do.
So is Julia's localized, self-interested, visceral rebellion actually more dangerous to the party than Winston's intellectual angst? Because her rebellion is rooted in primal, undeniable human biology.
That is a profound observation, and it cuts to the core of the novel's debate. The party recognizes that the sex instinct creates a private world that they cannot fully monitor or control.
Right. By indulging in desire, Julia is keeping her internal emotional landscape authentic.
She is staying human in a system designed to make her a machine. However, the tragedy of the novel suggests that even this primal instinct is not safe. Winston and Julia believe their inner hearts are impenetrable.
but the party's power is so total, so surgically precise, that it can eventually reach into the deepest recesses of the human psyche and rewire those core biological instincts.
Exactly. And Winston isn't satisfied with just maintaining a private physical rebellion in the woods or in the secret room they rent above Mr. Charrington's junk shop.
He is consumed by the intellectual need to understand and ultimately destroy the system. He has had these fleeting moments of eye contact with O'Brien, a large, burly, highly intelligent member of the inner party.
Winston has cultivated this gut instinct that O'Brien is secretly a rebel, a member of the Brotherhood. And so Winston and Julia take a monumental suicidal risk. They go directly to O'Brien's opulent apartment.
And this is where the trap is truly sprung, though Winston is completely blind to it. O'Brien welcomes them in. He does something that leaves Winston breathless. He casually reaches over and turns off his telescreen, a privilege only the inner party possesses.
Winston, feeling safe, confesses everything. He admits they are thought criminals, adulterers, and enemies of the party, and he begs to join the legendary Brotherhood.
O'Brien doesn't flinch. He begins a chilling, methodical interrogation. He asks them if they're prepared to give their lives, to commit murder, to throw sulfuric acid in a child's face, to distribute habit-forming drugs, to commit suicide if ordered.
And to all of this horror, Winston enthusiastically answers yes.
Winston is willing to become a monster to fight the monsters. The only line they refuse to cross is when O'Brien asks if they are prepared to separate and never see each other again. Both Winston and Julia refuse.
O'Brien accepts this. He tells them they will be fighting in the dark, they will receive orders without ever knowing the grand strategy, and he promises to secretly deliver a copy of the book.
Emmanuel Goldstein's legendary, forbidden compendium of heresies, titled The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism.
Right. A few days later, during a stage drop in a chaotic crowd, Winston receives a briefcase containing the book. He takes it to a sanctuary above the junk shop and begins to read.
Orwell embeds actual chapters of Goldstein's book into the narrative, and it serves as the socio-political scaffolding for the entire universe of Oceania. The book explains the cyclical nature of human history.
It argues that there have always been three kinds of people: the high, the middle, and the low.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the high want to keep their power. The middle want to trade places with the high. The low just want a society where everyone is equal. Historically, the middle overthrows the high by enlisting the low, preaching liberty and justice.
But as soon as the middle seizes power, they thrust the low back into servitude and become the new high. The cycle repeats forever.
Exactly. But Oceania's inner party, the new high, has studied history. They've perfected the system so they can never be overthrown.
They have eliminated private property so wealth can't be challenged, and they use continuous surveillance to squash dissent before it forms. But the most crucial mechanism they use to freeze history in place is perpetual war.
The book reveals that the three superstates, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, are effectively identical in their social structures. They are fighting a war that literally cannot be won, over contested territories that don't ultimately matter to their survival.
So why fight it? The book lays out the chilling economic reality of totalitarianism. In the early 20th century, industrialization promised to eliminate human drudgery and poverty.
Machines could produce enough wealth to make everyone comfortable. But the inner party realizes that an all-around increase in wealth threatens their power.
If everyone has a house, a car, and enough food, they will become educated. They will learn to think for themselves.
And once they start thinking, they will realize the high, the ruling class, serves absolutely no function and they will overthrow them. Okay. To maintain a hierarchical society, poverty and ignorance are absolutely essential.
So the primary aim of modern warfare is to use up the products of the machine without raising the general standard of living.
People are working constantly to build boots, rations, and weapons, and instead of distributing those goods to improve lives, the government literally sinks them into the ocean or blows them up on a battlefield.
It keeps the masses impoverished, exhausted, and easily controlled by a constant manufactured state of fear and war hysteria. The war isn't meant to be won, it is meant to be continuous.
Exactly. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects. The object is not victory over Eurasia or Eastasia, but to keep the very structure of oceanic society intact.
This also perfectly explains why science in Oceania is dead. There are no new inventions unless they are specifically designed for more efficient weapons of mass destruction or more invasive tools for police espionage.
It's a closed loop of destruction.
Okay, but if we really dig into this, I have to challenge the concept of the war from the perspective of the people living through it. The book says 20 or 30 rocket bombs a week are falling on London. People are being blown to pieces in the streets.
It's horrific.
Does it really matter to the victim if the bomb was fired by Eurasia, Eastasia, or, as Julia brilliantly suspects earlier, fired by the government of Oceania itself just to keep people frightened?
That's the thing.
The blood on the cobblestones is just as real. It's like a horrific global theater production where the props are actual human lives.
That is the grim, unyielding reality. The physical suffering is entirely real, but the political narrative surrounding it is entirely synthetic.
Winston reads this, and he is exhilarated. He
Right.
realizes he finally understands how the party works. He understands the mechanics of doublethink, the economic necessity of artificial poverty, the falsification of the past.
But as he closes the book, a chilling thought strikes him. He still doesn't understand why. What is the ultimate psychological motive for this huge, accurately planned, exhausting effort to freeze history? Why do they want this power so badly?
He doesn't get the chance to find out from the book. He and Julia are in their rented room above the shop. Winston looks out the window at a stout, red-armed prole woman hanging laundry in the courtyard below, singing a popular song.
He watches her, and he has this moment of profound clarity and almost mystical connection.
He thinks the pearls are immortal, strength would change into consciousness. Out of those mighty loins, a race of conscious beings must one day come. He feels a genuine sense of hope for the future of humanity.
He turns to Julia and says, "We are the dead." And Julia echoes him, "We are the dead."
And immediately, an iron voice behind them says, "You are the dead."
It's coming from behind the picture of St. Clement's Church on the wall. The picture crashes to the floor, revealing a hidden telescreen. They have been watched the entire time.
The sanctuary was a cage. The house is surrounded. Boots stampede up the stairs. And in a moment of devastating symbolic violence, one of the stormtroopers picks up Winston's glass paperweight, his symbol of the beautiful, unalterable past.
The physical representation of his sanctuary with Julia.
Right, and he smashes it to pieces on the hearth. The coral rolls across the floor. It was all fragile. And Mr. Charrington walks in, no longer a mild, velvet-jacketed old man, but a cold, alert, commanding agent of the thought police.
It is the absolute shattering of reality. Winston's entire intellectual rebellion was orchestrated by the very people he thought he was fighting. He is taken to the Ministry of Love.
And Orwell's description of Minilove is suffocating. Winston is starved, repeatedly beaten by guards with truncheons, his body reduced to a bruised skeleton looped in filthy yellowish rags.
He is placed at a high-ceilinged, windowless holding cell with walls of glittering white porcelain where the lights are terrifyingly bright and never ever turn off. He loses all concept of time.
And the people he meets in this holding cell are a tragic, dark comedy of the party's inescapable terror.
First, he sees Ampleforth, the mild-mannered poet who worked with Winston at the Ministry of Truth. Ampleforth is in Minilove because he was assigned to translate a poem by Rudyard Kipling into Newspeak. But he left the word God at the end of a line.
Why? Because, as he desperately explains to Winston, it was the only possible rhyme for Rod. He allowed the structure of poetry to override party orthodoxy, and for that, he will be vaporized.
And then, even more tragically, in walks Parsons, Winston's neighbor, the man who is a mass of imbecile enthusiasms, the guy who sweat profusely while happily organizing community hikes and aggressively collecting dues for party initiatives.
Parsons is arrested for thought crime. Why? Because he was having a bad dream, and his 7-year-old daughter heard him muttering down with Big Brother in his sleep. She listened at the keyhole and immediately turned him in to the patrols.
And the profound horror of this is that Parsons isn't angry at her. He is proud of her. He tells Winston, "I'm glad they got me before it went any further. Thank you for saving me before it was too late."
The party's psychological conditioning is so total, so deeply rooted, that victims are pathetically grateful for their own impending execution.
But the real horror, the intellectual and physical climax of the novel, begins when the cell door opens and O'Brien enters. Winston, in shock, cries out, "They've got you too."
And O'Brien replies with a mild, almost regretful irony, "They got me a long time ago." O'Brien isn't a prisoner. He is the torturer. He is the intellectual architect of Winston's destruction.
The interrogation sequences with O'Brien are some of the most harrowing, dense philosophical dialogues ever put to paper. Winston is strapped to a bed that has a dial on it controlled by O'Brien that administers varying degrees of agonizing electrical pain.
But O'Brien's goal is not merely to extract a confession. The party doesn't care about confessions. They already know everything. And he doesn't just want to punish Winston.
As O'Brien plainly states, We do not merely destroy our enemies, we change them. He wants to cure Winston of his insanity. And in Oceania, insanity is defined as the belief in an objective reality outside the party's control.
O'Brien holds up 4 fingers. He asks Winston how many fingers he is holding up. Winston says 4. O'Brien administers a surge of pain and tells him that if the party says there are 5 fingers, how many are there?
Winston, desperate to stop the agony, cries out that there are 5. But O'Brien knows he's lying to save himself. O'Brien increases the pain. He doesn't just want Winston to say 5. He needs Winston to literally, genuinely see 5.
He needs Winston to completely, unequivocally surrender his own sensory perception to the party's dictate. This raises an important question, and we need to break down the philosophy O'Brien is pushing here.
O'Brien tells Winston that reality is not external. It does not exist in the physical world. It exists only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. He calls it collective solipsism.
Let's define this. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. O'Brien is arguing that the collective mind of the party dictates the universe.
If everyone believes the past has changed, and all records say it's changed, hasn't it functionally changed? O'Brien boasts that the party controls matter because they control the mind. They make the laws of nature.
If they want to say the Earth is the center of the universe, or that gravity doesn't exist, it is true.
O'Brien is dismantling the very concept of objective truth. He points out the fatal flaw of previous totalitarian regimes, like the Inquisition or the Nazis. Those regimes killed their enemies publicly. They created martyrs.
They allowed men to die holding on to their rebellious beliefs, which only inspired others. The inner party does not make that mistake.
O'Brien says, we make the brain perfect before we blow it out. They will wash Winston clean. They will break him down until he genuinely, authentically loves Big Brother, and only then will they execute him.
This is what horrifies me the most. O'Brien says the old despotisms commanded thou shalt not. The totalitarians commanded thou shalt. But Oceania commands thou shalt art.
They don't just want to kill you. They want to hollow you out and fill your empty shell with their ideology.
They want you to beg for the bullet with a clean mind. It's not just murder. It's the total surgical theft of the soul. You don't even get to die as yourself. You die as an extension of the state.
That is the ultimate terror. And during this excruciating process of torture and brainwashing, Winston finally gets the answer to the why. Why does the party want this absolute power?
He asks O'Brien. He assumes O'Brien will give some utilitarian answer, that the party seeks power for the good of the masses because human beings are too weak to govern themselves.
O'Brien hits him with a brutal dose of pain for such a stupid answer. O'Brien says it plainly, stripping away all hypocrisy. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. Power is not a means, it is an end. The goal of power is power. The goal of torture is torture.
O'Brien paints a picture of the future that is absolutely chilling. He describes a world without art, without literature, without friendship. A world where the sex instinct is entirely eradicated, where neurological pleasure is eliminated except for the thrill of victory and the intoxication of power.
He tells Winston, if you want to picture the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
But despite the pain, despite his physical degradation, Winston clings to one final secret truth. His body is an absolute ruin. O'Brien forces him to look in a mirror, and Winston breaks down crying at the skeletal, gray, battered, toothless creature staring back at him.
He has confessed everything. He has implicated everyone. He has surrendered his intellect and his grip on reality. He can double think and see 5 fingers.
But he tells O'Brien with a flicker of defiance, I have not betrayed Julia, and O'Brien agrees. Winston has confessed her crimes, but he has not stopped loving her. His inner heart is still his own.
But O'Brien knows this. He knew it all along. Which leads us to the most dreaded place in the entire world, the basement of the Ministry of Love, Room 101.
Room 101 is legendary in its psychological cruelty. As O'Brien explains, Room 101 contains the worst thing in the world, and that thing varies from person to person.
Because the party surveillance is so granular, so intimately invasive, they know everyone's deepest, most paralyzing, unreasoning phobia. For Winston, who has had terrifying nightmares about them since childhood, it is rats.
O'Brien brings in a wire cage divided into 2 compartments, filled with enormous, starving, carnivorous rats. The cage is fitted with a mask designed to strap directly onto Winston's face.
O'Brien explains the mechanics calmly. When he presses a lever, the doors will slide up, and the starving rats will shoot out and bore straight into Winston's face, eating his eyes and his tongue.
The panic Winston feels is beyond human description. He is reduced to a blind, screaming, animalistic terror. The world goes dark. He is frantically searching his mind for the one thing, the only thing in the universe he can put between himself and the rats.
And he finds it.
He screams, "Do it to Julia! Do it to Julia! Not me, Julia! I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off, strip her to the bones. Not me, Julia. Not me."
And with those agonizing words, the cage door clicks shut. Winston is saved from the rats. But he is entirely destroyed as a human being. The final betrayal is complete.
The party hasn't just broken his body or his intellect. They have reached into the sacred space of his soul and broken his capacity for human loyalty. They forced him, under the threat of primal terror, to willingly, desperately prioritize his own physical survival over the woman he loved.
He didn't just say it. In that moment, he meant it. He wanted the rats to eat her instead of him.
We see the devastating aftermath of this in the final chapter. Winston has been released back into society. He's sitting at the Chestnut Tree Cafe, a known haunt for broken, disgraced party members who are just waiting for the inevitable bullet to the back of the head.
He is a shell of a man. He spends his days drinking saccharin gin flavored with cloves, tracing patterns in the dust on the table.
We learn that he and Julia have briefly met again, by chance, in a park on a freezing day.
And that meeting is arguably the saddest moment in the book. There is no warmth, no tragic romance, no secret spark of rebellion. They both admit, with a corpse-like apathy, that they betrayed each other in room 101.
Julia explains the psychology of it perfectly. She says, under the branches, you don't care what happens to the other person. You only care about yourself.
And once you have felt that, once you have genuinely wished that horror onto someone you loved, the connection is entirely severed. You can never feel the same way about them again. They are thickened, hardened. They part ways without a second thought.
Winston is sitting in the cafe listening to the telescreen. There's a trumpet call and an excited announcement of a massive, miraculous military victory in Africa against Eurasia.
Winston visualizes the map, the white arrow tearing across the black arrow. And as he listens to the victory march, Winston feels a genuine, overwhelming surge of joy. The tears run down his nose.
The novel ends with these crushing words. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother.
It is a spiritual death. The healing change that O'Brien promised has finally happened. The rebellion is over, not with a bang, not with a heroic martyrdom, but with a quiet, gin-soaked whimper of submission.
The total triumph of totalitarian power is complete. The boot has stamped on the human face, and the human face smiled back. Let's take a breath. It is a suffocating conclusion.
It really is.
We've traced Winston's massive journey today. From the creeping, self-imposed paranoia of the panopticon in his apartment to the insidious weaponization of language and memory via Newspeak and the Ministry of Truth.
To the beautiful but doomed physical rebellion with Julia, and finally to the absolute, soul-crushing triumph of O'Brien's philosophy in Room 101.
It is a heavy journey, yes, but an absolutely vital one. Orwell didn't write 1984 as a prophecy of a guaranteed future. He wrote it as a severe warning.
He was extrapolating the extreme logical conclusions of political trends he saw happening in his own time. The manipulation of objective truth, the centralization of power, and the systematic destruction of individual thought.
And this is where we connect back to you, the AudioSutra listener. This isn't just history, and it isn't just fiction. Next time you hear a political slogan that contradicts itself, or you notice a news story being quietly scrubbed or altered on the internet without acknowledgement, remember Winston Smith and the memory hole.
Remember how easily reality can be rewritten when we lose the specific words required to defend it. Remember that freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows.
But before we leave you, there is one final fascinating nugget hidden in the architecture of the source material. It's something many readers completely overlook because it comes after the story ends.
The appendix on the principles of Newspeak, the essay detailing how the language destroys thought, is written in standard English. But more importantly, it is written in the past tense.
It explicitly says, Newspeak was the official language of Oceania.
Does this subtle grammatical framing by Orwell imply that eventually, against all of O'Brien's arrogant boasts of eternal power, the party did fall? Did the proles finally rise and reclaim history? It's a lingering thought to carry with you long after the audio ends.